Heidi ho. I think I'm online. Let me know if you guys can hear me, and we will get stuck into things. Well, heidi ho. It looks like I am on my end. Awesome. Good stuff. Well, they're all coming in now. Rightio. Okay, I just wanted to do it. This is sort of like an off-the-cuff live feed because it's one question that I get a lot, and I think other people are starting to talk about it now a bit more. And there are other YouTube videos out there, I think, really trying to cash in on this whole thing and do their flying tests and so forth. And I think we need to clear the air from a basic maths point of view on this and sort it out. So let's just get right into it rather than rumbling. People ask me, should I try 6S or should I do a 6S setup? And my answer is, well, it depends on many things, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve and so forth. So is 6S better? I try not to answer any of these questions with a yes or no because they pretty much, there is no such thing as a better or worse. It's your specific goals that you're trying to achieve, and what the outcome you're trying to achieve for you and what you think is best, whether it will suit you or not. But let me just say very broadly, is 6S better? Yes. I say that very tentatively. So 6S, the higher voltage gives you better efficiency and better torque and lower current draw and so forth. So you do get a benefit there. There is a benefit there. But like everything in life, you don't get anything for free. There are downsides, and the downsides are varied. So I've written down some things here just so that I don't forget them. So benefits of 6S, it's more efficient, and you have better torque values in general. That said, it's a small amount. We're talking about like a couple of percent. Going from 4S to 6S is not a huge difference. It's a couple of percent, and the bigger you go, the higher voltage you go, the better it gets. But there are downsides. But yes, there is an efficiency and torque improvement and so forth. So when you hear pilots talking about, oh, the throttle feels more linear, that's because you've got more torque there, and it feels more linear. And there is a better efficiency, so technically you should have longer flight time. Lower current draw. So there's a couple of benefits from lower current draws. So first of all, less voltage sag. So that means that the harder you work a battery, technically the less of it you can use without damaging it. So it means that you can use more of your battery's capacity. Also, it means that you're looking after your battery better, so it's going to last longer in terms of number of cycles. And it also means that all these bullshit C ratings that we're talking about, 80C, 100C, which are all bullshit, the most we're getting is about 30 to 40C out of a battery. So if you're using a high power setup or a racing quad, you are working your battery too hard for what it can handle in the long term. So the harder you work something, the shorter its lifespan is going to be. The harder you drive a car, the less number of miles or kilometers the engine is going to last before it blows up. It's just a simple fact of physics. So the harder you work a battery, the less number of cycles you're going to get out of it before it dies. So with this, you're using it less harshly. So you're going to improve its lifespan, and you're going to be a bit more down to the realistic C rating of what the battery can actually handle. It also means that now you can use smaller gauge wires on your power wires. For example, like your going into your XT60, your battery wires can be smaller. The wires going to your ESCs can now be smaller, and so forth. So that means that you're losing a little bit of weight in terms of there, but if it's a tight build, it means smaller wires are easier to use. So they're the benefits of 6S. The limitations are the availability of electronics, batteries, and motors and so forth. So that's been helped in recent times by most flight controllers, most PDBs and so forth are now 6S rated because those people have been asking for it. But of course, and I'll talk about this at a later stage, you need to match your motor for the voltage that you're using. And it means then that we need to have a whole new set of KV motors available to us to match that, of which there's not a huge range at the moment. There are some out there, but there's not a huge range. I'm sure as 6S becomes more common, doing it properly, there will be more out there, but right now there's not a huge amount. Here's one of the big things, I think, the reason why 6S hasn't picked up as quickly as it has in the past is that you've got to replace your motors and your batteries. Now, we're a community where we're bitching about the price of everything. Now, you think about all of your batteries and all of your motors, it can start to get quite expensive if you want to look at it like that. If let's say you're someone that's into this seriously, you've got 24S packs. So now you've got to buy 26S packs. Now remember, these are going to have more cells in them, so they're going to be more expensive. So not only you got to replace it, but they're going to be more expensive. That's just the way that it works. And I think that's probably one of the big things out there why people aren't doing it, because now you've got to replace it and it's more expensive. Someone just Dangerous said 2,420 kV and all N6S. Yeah, you want to do that, go for it. You don't understand what 6S means. 6S, for those people who want to go for speed, go crazy, but you're going to kill shit. So let's continue on with the downsides to it. If you want to go really low kV, so this is higher than 6S, you may run into an issue where you can't actually get enough winds on the stator to get it low enough. We're not really there with 6S, but you got to think there's limitations. There's only the more winds you put on a stator, the lower the kV is going to be. There's only so much physical area in between the gaps in the stator where they put the winds through. So you limit yourself to there's a high limit and a low limit of winds that you can put on. Like one is the smallest amount, and let's say, I don't know, 30 is the most amount. You can't go any more than that. So that limits your KV. So if that's the case, then why don't we just go higher and higher and higher and higher in voltage? Well, there are limitations there, and I just want to cover some that are a bit more obvious. There's other ones. So, for example, there's a limitation with electronics. The electronics that you've got have got to step down all this sort of stuff from the input voltage down to like your 3.3 volts going into your electronics, and that gets harder and harder and harder to do. It gets more complicated, and some of these guys just it becomes more expensive. It becomes harder. Then the real limitation becomes down to, as you increase cells, you increase the amount of packaging around each individual cell. There's at a point in time where that packaging, the weight of that packaging outweighs the performance increase. So you got to remember, multi-rotors, it's all dead weight that we add to these things. As you know, if you put a bigger battery on, you get longer flight time. If you get to a certain point where you put a bigger battery on, the flight time decreases because the weight of the battery outweighs the extra capacity of the battery. The same thing can happen with the high voltage, where you're only getting a couple of % in performance increase in the high voltage situation, where the weight of the packaging and so forth and the extra cells will outweigh the increase in the performance. So if you look at, say, 3D Helis, when they first came on the market, they were like 3S, 4S. They're now up to 14S, is around that. And I don't think they're going any higher because they're not seeing any benefit from it. That's one of the reasons why. So there is a limitation. You just can't keep on going up in voltage because I think shit just gets even more complicated to work on, and there are limitations. But to answer, is 6S better? Technically, yes. Now, I don't need to go out there and do a flight test. The mathematics shows that it's proven. It's nothing unknown. But here, I want to debunk some of these videos that some of these pilots and reviewers and stuff that have put out saying it's so much better and I'm getting 1 minute extra flight time out of this, because as soon as I hear that, I know it's bullshit. The problem is that I don't think I've seen a review yet or a test where the person has tested apples with apples. So like the common thing that what they do is they go and get, first of all, what you do is you get your standard 2300 kV motor, whatever it is, 2400 kV motor, and then put a 6S battery on there. Holy shit, it's so much more powerful and it's so much more faster. Well, of course it is, because you're increasing the voltage. You're also increasing the watt hours of the battery, so everything's going up. But now what you're doing is you're also increasing your amperage going into it. Your efficiency is getting worse. So the way to do 6S properly is to increase the voltage, but then at the same time also decrease the kV of the motor to suit, but also decrease the watt hour of the battery so that it's the testing beforehand, if you want to test apples with apples. Hang on a second. My phone is actually going off. So what you want to do is you want to get essentially what you want to do, sorry, I'm going to turn this phone off. Essentially what you want to do is you want to get the same RPM out of the motor at both voltages, so it's running the same RPM, because otherwise it's kind of like comparing speeds with different diff gearing sets, and it's not, you can't compare the same speed. So you want to get the same RPM out of the motor at the different voltages. That means matching your voltage with your kV. Second of all, you want to match both the 4S and 6S battery with its energy availability. Now, you can't do that in milliamp hours. You have to do it in watt hours. So let's look at this. And I did some quick calculations before. It's all very, very simple calculations. So watt hours is just simply amp hours times volts, and you get your watt hours. We all know that. And also RPM is just kV times is kV times by the volts that you're running, and then you get your RPM. So if we want, let's say we're running a 2400 kV motor, and also let's assume that all of these motors, the stated numbers are actually correct. Now remember, a lot of these motors are up to 100 kV out, what their stated kV is. So you got to take that into account as well. There's lots of gray area there. You have to actually go and test the kV of the motor yourself, which is not that hard to do, to see what it actually is outputting. Don't just trust it. But let's assume all of this is correct, because we're also the battery capacities in these batteries. There are some 1300 amp hour batteries that have got 1500 amp hour capacity in them. So once again, the battery label may lie, but let's assume that they're correct. So let's say you're running a 2400 kV motor on 6S, which is 16.8 volts. You will get an RPM of 40,320, and that's not including the prop drag. You'll never fully get that, but let's talk theoretical. If you want to go to 6S, which is 25.2 volts, you need to run a 1600 kV motor to get 40,320 RPM. So let's assume both of those motors are outputting the kV that they say they are exactly. If you're running a 2400 kV motor, then you need to go down to a 1600 kV motor. If you're running a 1700 kV motor or an 1800 kV motor, Of course, you're going to say, wow, it feels more powerful. Of course it is, because you're running higher KV in comparison, and you're not testing apples with apples. So 2400 down to 1600 kV. That's simple maths. If you're not doing that, then you're not comparing apples with apples. Now let's go to the battery side of things. So if you're running a 1300 milliamp hour 4S, which most of us are, that is 21.84 watt hours. Now, if you want to get the same watt hours out of a 6S pack, you need to run an 850 milliamp 6S pack. Now that's 21.42 watt hours. Not exactly the same, but pretty damn close. So an 850 milliamp hour 6S pack. Now, the whole reason behind this is that 850 milliamp 6S pack should weigh pretty much the same as the 1300 milliamp hour 4S pack. So if you get what I'm saying, these two quads now weigh the same, but the difference will be in the slide efficiency. We're talking a couple of percent. We're not talking massive amounts. So you might get 20 seconds extra flight time or something like that out of there, depending on how hard you fly. And flight time is not a good way to judge it either, because the way that we fly is different every single time. So looking at those, I'll say it once again. If you look at these, like I know Joshua Bardwell did a test, and he covered a lot of this, but once again, he didn't use the correct size battery, and he's saying, oh, it can fly for longer and so forth. Of course it can, because you're using much higher watt hours. So for all of you guys out there that want to know, is 6S better, and you want to test it out, and you want to compare apples with apples, it's very simple to work it out. All you need to do is you need to work out so that the battery that you're using and comparing with your 4S setup or whatever has the same watt hours. And watt hours is just amp hours times volts, and you get your watt hours. It's not hard to work out. Then you need to get a motor that is that gets to the same RPM. And to get the same RPM, you got to work out your RPM, which is working out from KV. KV is just your KV times your volts that you're running will give you your RPM. Then you can test like for like. Then you don't need to worry about changing props. You can use exactly the same prop. Everything else is the same. Now, all things being equal, the battery should weigh about the same. It'll have the same watt hours. The motor will be like for like, and you can test it out. What you'll find is that all things being equal, that you will get better efficiency, you'll get higher torque, it will all be better, but it'll be a small amount better. It's not going to be a huge amount better, it's a small amount better. So yes, there is a benefit there, but I just want to point this out because I'm seeing a lot of this and a lot of people talking about it. If you don't test apples with apples, the test is, I'm sorry, a complete waste of time. If it's better for you, great, but a lot of these pilots, like for example, putting a 1300 milliamp hour 6S and they're going, I'm getting a better flight time, and I'm going, great. So, but these are the same pilots that said, well, I don't want to put an 1800 milliamp hour 4S on there because it weighs too much. Well, now you're going over to the same as what you didn't want to do, but you're doing it with 6S. I don't really see the difference. You've got a heavy quad, which you said you never wanted. So yes, it's better, but it's not mind-blowingly better. This is not something that's going to blow our minds and improve our sport. So yes, 6S is better, and you can, if you wish, with a bit of a weight penalty, get a noticeable increase in flight time. But you're getting a weight increase. There's no. You can't get this massive improvement without some kind of a downside. So I'm not saying that if you put a 1300 milliamp hour pack on there, a 6S compared to 4S, that it's wrong and you shouldn't be doing that. But don't go out there stating to people that, oh, it's a massive improvement, because the improvement is there. It's just not huge. So does everyone understand where I'm coming from there? Now, I could go out there and do a flight test for you and do a comparison, but you know what I just said. The simple maths there shows you it. There's no such thing as free energy, and anyone who believes in that stuff needs to go back to school. How much of a weight increase? Well, It depends on the setup. This is one of the things. You guys are asking all these questions. The mathematics are there for you to check that out. If you want to know how much of a weight increase, get a 1300 milliamp hour pack, weigh the individual cells, add 2 more cells on there, and then you've got it. It's pretty basic stuff. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't know the basics of electronics, and I can only suggest go out and learn it, because you wouldn't have to ask these questions. It's actually very simple to answer. Dennis Lee, what about the supposed lack of battery sag? Is this relative to the comparison you just made? Yeah, I don't know if you were there right in the beginning. I did mention the battery sag. It's definitely a contributing factor. The big difference really there, like I said, is it means that you're not pushing the battery as hard, so you'll get a longer lifespan cycle-wise out of the battery. It may also mean that the available capacity that you can use is a bit more, because the capacity of a battery is really dependent on how hard you push it. So if you really push a battery hard, its capacity actually drops. Interesting. So this is the question that I get when I answer some of the questions. So RAFPV asked this, and this is a common question: do you think the little extra in flight time is worth the jump in price? I can't answer that for you, because I can't answer whether or not a $10 motor or a $25 motor is worth it in price for you. That's something that you have to ask for yourself. Chad, do you know any good places to fly FPV on the Gold Coast? Anywhere where there's no law enforcement, because it's flying RC models is pretty much illegal all the way on the Gold Coast anyway. Jason Hull said, it isn't worth the money spent, then I'll just buy more 4S packs with all that loot. Yeah, see, I think, me personally, I think that's one of the reasons why 6S hasn't taken off, because it means spending more money. And I know a lot of you guys out there, you've got a very low budget about what you want to spend and what you think is practical to spend on this hobby, and just totally chucking out everything that you've got and starting again with 6S, or spending more on those batteries for that little bit of extra flight time may not be worth it. You may change your mind where you go, okay, cool, with the newer motors we've got, I will take a hit in performance by adding a little bit of extra weight and getting a minute's extra flight time. That's for you to decide. But that's not the 6S working. That's just you adding more capacity or more watt hours, more energy density energy into your battery by form of adding more weight. Voltage spikes running electronics, is it the same when in 6S or worse? No, it's actually better, generally speaking. You still will have to maybe run caps. It really depends on the situation. So you might have to run those electrolytic caps. It depends on the ESC. It depends on the ESC is what's making all the noise in that situation. And it's working harder at the higher voltages and so forth. And I don't want to get into the technical side of it, but the ESCs have got a certain amount of noise suppression for those little tantalum caps and so forth that they put on there, and they've only got a certain amount of space, or they only want to put it on a certain price. So some have got more than others, so some are noisier than others. So that's why you may need to run a cap on there and so forth. But an ESC that is built for 6S ground up, you probably won't have to run a cap. That said, 6S is not a common thing, so a lot of the manufacturers are not designing them that way to not require you to have to run caps. When there's less watt hours, does it draw less amps? No, that's not the way that it works. We're not talking watt hours is the amount of available energy in the battery. What you draw less amps when you increase your voltage. But the watt hours has nothing. The watt hours is just the energy it's the total energy available in the battery when you look at the capacity and the voltage together. What's your sweet spot on motor KV if you want to build a 6S racer? Well, once again, that's simple maths. This is, I can only, guys, I can only encourage you out there, rather than answering the question, I give tools so that you can answer it yourself, teach you how to teach it yourself. What you want, what's the best one for 6S? Well, what's the best one for 4S? No one can agree whether it's 2400 kV, 2600 kV, 2800 kV, what size stator. Everyone, what type of prop? Do you want a low pitch prop with a high kV motor, or a high pitch prop with a low kV motor? No one can answer that. So to answer that, I'd have to ask, well, what do you consider the best kV for 4S? Whereas we start. When you answer that, then you can use the calculation that I gave you for determining RPM to change that from 4S up to 6S. It's pretty simple. Do you think 6S is better across the board? As I said, yes, 6S is better generally speaking, but there are downsides in terms of availability for the electronics and components and higher price and so forth. You guys need to juggle that. What I'm saying is, yes, it's better, but it's not 70% better like I'm seeing in some of these flight reviews, because they're not comparing it correctly. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to try 6S, do it properly, try it. You'll probably find there's an improvement. If you want to try 6S and you're willing to take the weight penalty of having a heavier battery because you've got more energy in there, go for it. You might be happy with that extra weight. That's for you to decide. But what we're talking about here is 4S versus 6S. Same. The only different changes is the voltage, everything else being equal. And I'm not seeing tests out there where it is equal. BTM5MNNN, and he said, what about Steele's latest video where he tests comparing 4 and 6S? His conclusion, the flight times seem very obscure to me, like going from 2 to 3.3 minutes. Can you please confirm what batteries he was using in 4 and 6S? So I'm assuming that he'll be using his Thunder Power 1300 milliamp hour packs in 4S. What capacity battery, what milliamp hour 6S battery was he using to compare? So if someone can, he was using 6S 1100 milliamp hour packs. There you go. Are you guys seeing that now? Let's go back to my calculations. Watt hours, amp hours times volts equals watt hours. A 1300 milliamp hour 4S is 21.84 watt hours. 850 milliamp hour 6S is 21.42. So let's do a quick calculation. So 1.1 times 25.2 equals. Okay, so Steele was comparing a 21.84 watt hour battery with a 27.72 watt hour battery. Of course, he's going to get much longer flight times. It's pretty simple mathematics here, guys. You got to stop thinking about battery capacity as just being milliamp hours. It's watt hours, energy density. When you're comparing different voltages, the watt hours is the important size. Now, I'm not saying that his 6S setup is wrong, but what I'm saying is he's not comparing the voltage change only. He's putting essentially a bigger capacity battery on there and going, I'm getting longer flight times. Well, of course you are. He's getting a bigger capacity battery with, I'm assuming, a weight penalty. So I don't know the difference between a 1300 4S and a 1100 6S. I don't know the difference in there, but I would assume that the 1100 milliamp hour 6S is quite a bit heavier. Now, for someone who is always, I'm at 584 grams or something like that, and I don't want to go any heavier. That's how heavy I want to be. Now he's taking a weight penalty and saying it's better. If that's better for him, great. I'm happy for him. But what I'm just trying to put this out to you guys, that it's not cut and dry. There's shit going on behind the scenes. Just like Joshua Bardwell used a larger energy capacity battery in his 4S and 6S one, where he was getting that guy to do around the track. He was using one that had more watt hours in it. So of course it's going to fly for longer. So guys, seriously, I'm going to say this again. I don't mind. Like, everyone's new to this. I was new to this, but I'm telling you, if someone asks you the question, give them the RPM calculation techniques and give them the watt hour calculation techniques, and then get them to calculate it out themselves. It's only then, when you compare apples with apples, you will find out whether or not this is useful or not. Magic Smoke, are you and Steele still mad at each other? Yush goes, no, I'm not mad at him. Me and Steele, we're good mates. We've, like, don't assume that this is a dig at Steele. It's not a dig at Steele. But I'm just saying, from a maths point of view, that's why he's getting longer. It's not because of the voltage. And if he's saying it's because of the voltage, well, I disagree with him. And I'll always disagree with someone when I think they're wrong, friend or not. I'm not calling him an idiot, so this is not a dig at Steele. I'm actually intending on having dinner with Steele in about a week when on my next trip. Looking forward to seeing him. So not a dig, okay? Can I put that out there? This is not a dig. We're good friends. Please let it rest. Dennis Lee, Steele had lower KV motors on 6S, like 1700, with a weight difference of something like 20 grams, something like that. Okay, yep. I would like to see the difference in the weight. That if that's the case, great. But once again, we're talking about extra weight there. I'll believe the weight things when I see it with my own eyes. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying anyone's lying. But yeah, he had lower KV motor. So he had a 1700 KV motor. Once again, he runs like 2350 KV motors. So he would be down around, if you wanted to compare like for like, he'd be down around lower than 1600 kV. So he's not testing the same KV style motor to get the same RPM. So it's not like for like. This is what I'm saying. You can't test these things. You can't test something, one option, and have everything else variable. That's not the way that a test works. MC Creation said, Joshua Bardwell did a test comparing apples to apples, no difference. Well, he did a more recent test where he said it was actually better. But there is an improvement. There is an improvement. The maths don't lie. It's basic maths, but it's not huge. You have to go somewhere else to get that improvement. That photo of you two connected with the transmitter straps is great. Yeah, I thought that was a good photo. Onigiri, Noelle took that photo. It has to be a match situation and test, or the results are invalid. There we go. That's you need to keep all other variables as much as physically possible under control and the same if you want to test one area. And if you don't, then the test is invalid, especially if you're trying to answer a question. I think what people are trying to get at is the higher the voltage with more pep to it makes the extra weight not feel as bad. Invert FPV, you're not getting what I've been saying the entire time. If you match the KV and the watt hours of the battery, there is no pep to it. There is no extra pep to it. That's just the simple. Going up higher voltage is for the higher efficiency. Or if you want to get extra speed and extra power, you bump it up. But if you want to get extra speed and extra power, you can just bump up the KV on 4S. You get the same. The efficiency is not quite the same. But once you're talking about pep and power is not what we're talking about. There is not the reason why you go on to higher voltage. You go there because you want to get extra efficiency. Okay, sorry, Invert. I thought you were really here the whole time. Yeah. I was talking about that right from the beginning. Basically, with 6S, you have higher voltage and less current, but in the end, the power watt hours is the same voltage current. The power is not really watt hours. Like you're getting what you're going from to the higher voltage. What you're gaining is extra efficiency and more torque. So you're not gaining more thrust. You're not gaining more bang power on lots of stuff. It's not like going from a 4-cylinder to an 8-cylinder. You're gaining more efficiency. That's the whole reason for doing it. But there is a point there where the added complication and the extra weight of the cells, the packaging of the cells and so forth, outweighs the extra efficiency, because the efficiency we're talking about is a couple of percent. So if you add a couple of grams to it, then it's a bit of a problem. So do you get where I'm coming from? Frequency Garden, thank you for clearing up the overhype. Well, I don't know if it's overhype. I think it's just people not understanding the situation. Captain Vanover, I think I'm going to start racing 3S 4000 kV. Go for it. People are having a hard time figuring this out because a lot of moron racers starting to put 6S on their 4S quads, trying to get more speed, and then they didn't understand why it went wrong. I don't know if it's really that. Like I keep on saying, there is an advantage to 6S. So if you want better performance, which is including of efficiency, then yes, go to 6S. Just know that it's not a huge improvement, and that there are downsides to it. Can you explain what Steele was talking about when he said it was more floaty and he lost throttle resolution? I don't know. I haven't watched that entire video. I don't like to assume, but let me assume it's more floaty. Well, he's essentially gone to a higher kV mode. Even though he's gone down in kV, he hasn't gone down the same amount to equal what he normally runs. So he's got a higher kV setup, so it would feel more floaty and responsive. It's kind of like going from an unpowerful car to a powerful car. It's kind of like, oh, it's really squirrely. That's what I'm thinking maybe he's talking about in terms of that. And because there's more power there, it feels like there's less throttle resolution. I'm only assuming there. I could be completely wrong because I haven't heard what he said, and I wasn't around when he said it. So, yeah. Captain Vanover, what about 5S? Any advantages over 4S in your eyes, Chad? I don't mean to be blunt, but did you just not listen to everything that I said? Yes, there is an improvement on increasing voltage. The improvement is small. And if you want to compare apples with apples, the improvement is small. But there is an improvement over it. Steele was saying he spent more time in the lower throttle range, less time at full throttle. Of course, because he essentially had a higher kV motor when you're comparing 6S with 4S. No different to if he was running a 2600 kV 4S motor on there. He would spend less time in full throttle because it's more powerful. Random FPV, D-Shot 600 or D-Shot 1200. Take your pick. D-Shot 600, D-Shot 1200, D-Shot 2400. As far as I'm concerned, they make no difference. And as far as the person who invented them, they make no difference. Felix only made those ones as a fuck you to Multi-Shot, because Multi-Shot kept on saying, you guys are slower than us and we're better because we're faster. I feel absolutely no difference between them. I run D-Shot 2400 because that's what it's standard on the ESCs, and I can't be bothered ticking another box window. But I can't feel any difference, and the guy invented them says there is no difference. Matt Matthews, do the switching transistors on ESCs dissipate heat less when running on 6S? Over my pay grade to be really answering that, but what I'd probably end up saying, and I could be completely wrong here, the more important thing is that doing the same thing on 6S, they're running less current, so they're not working as hard, so they're running better. So they're not producing as much heat to begin with. How many packs of batteries do you go through a day? It depends on how much I'm flying. In the past, I've gone through like 20 packs a day. I don't generally tend to do that these times. Who's going to do your RTRs? What does that mean? Am I going to stick with 4S now? I've got some 6S, and I will, over time, probably switch over to 6S because, like I said, there is an improvement there. But I'm testing out various different setups. I personally don't really care about that little bit of extra flight time and want to run about the same weight. So it's not a huge thing for me. I probably will switch wholly over to 6S or 5S in the future. But I mean, my batteries last me ages, so there's no huge hurry. I think the big thing for me, like I said, it's really a matter of for me the big thing is switching it all over to 6S. I've got to buy new batteries, got to buy new motors and that sort of stuff. Contrary to what people think, I buy a lot of the shit that I fly. So yeah, I'm like, well, it flies good enough for me. I don't need to change it. Am I going to KFC this time? Maybe. How about BMS Web? I didn't see them talking about Helix and 6S. Well, you have to talk to them. They have been doing some testing. Brian Islip, I've been flying 6S freestyle for a year. The drawback is that it isn't being discussed. It's hard to tune because the default pills and filters are designed for 4S. If you were changing like for like, then I would definitely say, well, certainly from my experience, that the PIDs should be almost identical, very, very similar. What I'd be saying is what you're doing is you're changing the RPM of the motors more. So like you're going to 6S, but you're not going to an equal kV by changing when you change the voltage, and that's what's affecting your PIDs dramatically. Any traveling coming soon? Yep, going to be going to see Kathleen soon. What do you think about Schizo's dark matter battery? It's another battery. There's been no improvement in battery technology. If you want to support Schizo, go ahead and buy it. Awesome. I'm sure it's a really good battery. Schizo won't make shit batteries because he flies a lot. He wants something good, but I'm not going to say it's the best battery in the world. And I saw the video of him starting it with a car. That's cool. I've seen plenty of batteries like that start cars. It's nothing new. I'd love to see you committed into racing for at least one season just to see where it goes. I don't really have the drive for racing. I lost it a while ago. We'll see how we go. How do you determine the RPM of the motors? Simple. Get the kV and then times it by the voltage that you're running. Of course, that's not going to be the actual RPM that you're going to be getting with the prop on because the prop has a load. But that's how you get the theoretical amount. And also remember, like I said before, most of these motors with the kV that they write on them is not the actual kV. You could be 100 kV out either side on these motors. Thanks. Does C rating become a factor in that it does need to be higher? Fueled Fury FPV, I'm guessing you've just come in here because of that question. No, if you're increasing just the voltage and you're keeping everything else at the same level, playing level of the field, so you're keeping the watt hours of the battery the same and you're keeping the RPM of the motors of the same, the C rating is actually, it'll be better because your amp draw rating will drop rather than go up because the higher voltage will mean a lower current draw. Isn't it a Lumia battery that hasn't, I guess you're saying about the Schizo battery, a Lumia battery that has a new sticker? I don't know. Most batteries out there are rebranded, so I would say most likely yes. Pretty much as far as I'm aware, I don't think Schizo has a battery manufacturing plant. What's your favorite? Oh, crap, where'd that go? What's your favorite prop? Well, I'm using the HQ V1S 5x4.5x3 prop on my freestyle frames. Really liking that. Admin's production. Don't worry. The available batteries here in Australia are also shit. Yeah, MC Creations here in Australia, we have struggled to get batteries as well. What's your favorite freestyle trick? Don't really have one. So it seems like the conclusion of Steele's video is that for an added 20-30 grams, you can elongate your flight times by a substantial amount. By the way, I haven't watched his whole thing. I haven't watched the whole thing either. I only watched a little bit. Yeah, judging by flight times is hard because each flight is slightly different. So it's hard to do. And if you think that if that weight is good enough for you to add and get that extra flight time and it's worthwhile for you, then great. So that's the efficiency of the 6S. Sorry, the efficiency of the 6S working to your advantage, as well as having higher energy amounts, so more watt hours in your battery. And the downside is the weight. If that weight works for you, great. But remember, we've been a community that is like, I don't want to fly those motors because those motors weigh 2 grams more. Now, have we come full circle now where we don't give a shit about weight and we're more than happy to put 30 grams that's a long way away from the center but going up? But the 2 grams on a motor still make a difference. This is just what I'm trying to say. What's your thoughts on X-Class? I think X-Class has got a long way to go. The bigger quads are the interesting way to go, but I think the racing that they do currently is boring. I don't want to say that because I'll upset people. They need to be precariously sort of perched. So when no one wants to crash them because they're so big and more expensive and so forth. But I think it's got a future there. It just needs to be built. What do you think about the 5.1 by 5.1 by 3 HQ? It's too much of a pitch for me, so I don't use them. But if in the right situation, they will be fine. What motors have you run and tested on 6S? Sorry if this was already covered in an earlier video. I've got a pile over there. If you're asking, can Motor X run on 6S? Of course it can. Every motor can. It's not the voltage that kills the motor. It's the current, which turns into heat, which then melts things. Can you gain additional yaw authority due to the increased torque? Of course you can, yeah. What voltage do you bring your quad down on 4S? I don't really go off voltage. I go off on milliamp hour consumption. So I have my first warning at 900 milliamp hours, and I usually land at about 1,000 milliamp hours. I have my voltage there as a warning. So the milliamp hours is just purely for everyday stuff. But if I have a battery failure, or I fail to charge it correctly or something like that, the voltage is there as a warning. So when I'm getting down to, say, 3.2 volts per cell under load, that's when I get warnings up going things are bad. But there's usually an outside factor there if I get a warning up there, because that's down to where you start to damage your battery. And that's usually a point where you're like, it's already things are quite bad and something else has gone wrong. Well, but the 2 grams on a motor are not distractively improving flight times. Yeah, but the pilots that tell you that weight matters are saying that it really affects the feel of the quad and feels really important to them. So I guess if you're going to believe one thing, then you should believe the other thing, or you should just treat it all as bullshit. What is it exactly that makes the KV different in the same size motor, the windings? Essentially, yeah, there's a lot of that down to it, but you see the windings there? There'll be a certain number of windings around the stator, and for every, say, like the more windings you have, the lower the KV, the less windings you have, the higher KV. So you take one winding off, you might drop the KV down by 200 KV. And the finished KV depends on many things: the type of winding, how many strands, is it single core winding, the type of stator. There's lots of things that are involved in that. There's a lot of variances there, but essentially the windings and how many wraps of the windings dictate the KV. Exactly, yeah. IRC Will said also, by running higher voltage and lower current, you have the potential of creating less heat, which can turn into better efficiency. That's a good point to bring up. So when you bring your batteries down, they're running really hot because they're starting, their resistance is coming up. So the heat coming off that battery has to have been caused by something. So you're wasting power by turning that battery into a heater. Likewise, when your ESCs get hot, when your motors get hot, that's all wasted power. Dennis Lee, ever do your own windings? I've played a little bit. I wouldn't say that I'm any good at it. I'm good friends with Felix, who does all the KISS stuff, and he's very hardcore into motor stuff and custom winding things. And I don't really have the time to fiddle around with that kind of stuff, but It is interesting. I'd rather get the motor manufacturers to, if I'm sure of something, get them to make some test motors for me. Do you know anything about the new Mr. Steel motor stuff? Will it be different? Is there a different motor that he makes? I don't know. You'd have to ask Steel. I don't really talk to him about motor stuff that he makes. Mindless. I have 6S capable rigs, but all tunes are on 4S and I'm lazy. I think that's the thing. Yeah, like I keep on saying, there is a benefit to 6S. It's not as massive as what people are saying because they're bringing in something else to the equation to improve its performance, whether it be higher KV or more energy in watt hours to the battery. And if that works, great, but it's not necessarily the 6S side of things that's making a huge difference. So yes, 6S is an improvement, but it's not an improvement of just by going to 6S, now you're going to have this much extra flight time and this much extra power. It doesn't work like that. When am I coming back to the racing scene? I don't know. Would you consider going on LDO live stream? I don't even know what that is. I apologize, but yeah, sure. Always happy to go on a live stream and just talk shit. Can you talk a bit about the new Hype Train Acro motors? Are they new? Because if they're new, I know nothing about them. Random, yeah. More than happy to go on yours. Sorry, we we got a bit disconnected there. Really happy to jump online and do a live feed with you. I will be in America very soon for a little while, so may be available on a more local time zone basis to go live on a live feed if you want. So send me I'll look out for you and I'll try and answer. I get lots of private messages, so I kind of ignore a lot of them, unfortunately. But if I see yours, I'll try and answer, and we can hook up a time if you still want. Invert FPV. So if you had everything the same other than voltage, there would be no noticeable difference. There would be a difference. This is what I don't think a lot of you are understanding. Yes, there is a difference, but it's not going to be like a 60, 70% performance increase. It's a small increase. And you could probably notice it. You'll put a timer on it, you'll notice it. There'll be an increase, but it's not going. You're not going to increase your flight time by a factor of 2 or anything like that. Like you see some of these tests, like Joshua's one with the racing one, because it wasn't a fair test. Enjoyed dinner, Mindless. And Mindless, get back to me about the dinner in LA. I'll have to send you a message. Carl Schutz, less sag at the end of the race. Yep, like I said, the fact one of the factors early on, definitely the possibility of less sag, so long as you're doing everything equal. And we're only talking about voltage here, because the current will be lower. You will get less battery sag, so you'll be able to use a bit more of the battery. Alexandru said, so I didn't get why 2207 motors sag batteries much faster than 2306. A very sort of rough question there. But first of all, I'd have to say the two motors that you've got, you'd have to test the KV. I would put money on it that regardless of what it says on the side of the motor, that you've got two different KV motors. And that might be part of the reason. Of course, they're both motors, the different stators, they have different properties, but that would be the first thing that I would say. Are you going to the Country Music Festival in Broadbeach? I don't have any intentions to. Invert FPV, will the motors use the same amount of power as on 4S, or would they sponge up a little, or spin up a little bit more to the greater available voltage? Same motors. So you're talking about the same motors, same KV motors, you're just changing the voltage. Of course you are. Of course they're going to spin up more. They're going to spin up a fair amount more, because KV is just what your RPM is going to be on 1 volt. So if you increase your voltage, you're going to increase your RPM. So they're going to spin up more. Would they make more power? Thrust? Then yes, they would make more thrust, but they would also suck more power as well at a higher amp draw. You're going to have to retype that question at Invert FPV. I'm getting completely confused about what you're saying there. There is. Alexandra, what is the factor that influence on motor reaction? I mean, instant spin and slow down. Well, it's partly to do with the ESC, how quickly the ESC can tell it to spin up. Slowing down is down to the ESC as well. And it's kind of like it's also got a load on it. So you've got a propeller, which has got a load on it. So the more power it's got, the quicker it can respond. So if you've got a little tiny motor with a big prop, it's not going to respond as quick as a big motor with a big prop. How you doing, Double Eight? Okay, so there's been a few people that seem to be coming in late to this conversation, but I am assuming that I have answered the whole talk about 6S. So I guess, to summarize, is 6S better performance-wise? Yes, it is. What it does is it increases the efficiency and the torque a little bit. That means that you can fly longer for the same watt-hour battery. But there are also downsides into it, where the battery is going to become more expensive. We have less to choose from in terms of choice right now. That will change. So there are downsides to it, and there is a limit to how much, to the voltage that you can go. What that is, we haven't really worked that out yet. Like I said, I've seen some tests out there that were not very good tests, because they brought a number of changes, a number of factors changed in there to the situation. Either the KV was not matched for what they compare from what they used on 4S, or the battery energy level, so watt hours wise, not capacity, wasn't matched with what they had on 4S. So that makes the test invalid is a bad, I guess it's invalid, but unfair. It's a biased and weighted test. So yeah, there is a benefit. It's not a huge benefit, but there is a benefit. We're talking like a couple of % here. Okay, so you've retyped it out. So let's see if we can do this before I go offline. If you have the same motors with different voltages, will they take the same amount of energy from the battery or take different amounts? So if you have the same motors with the same kV and you just put different voltage batteries on there, no, they won't, because you're increasing the voltage and keeping the kV same. So your RPM will increase, which your amp draw will increase. So it's you're going to increase your thrust, you're going to increase your power, but you're also going to increase your amp draw and current draw, and reduce your flight time, but you can also go to increase your speed. And I say, Will, can you convince Impulse to sponsor me, please? Go for it, Will. Sponsor him. Okay, so I think I've covered this. I hope that guy that was beneficial to you guys. So yes, 6S is beneficial, but not to what the extent that people are saying. It's a lot of outside influences that are also helping with that. So definitely give 6S a go. Just know that it's not just the voltage that people are getting the improvement from. It's the kV of the motors, and it's the watt hours of the batteries that people are not taking into account when they do these tests, and is not really making it totally fair. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go get some lunch, maybe get some KFC. I don't know, but I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for hanging around. It was a good chat, and we'll come back sometime soon. Anyway, see you later, guys. Ciao.